Hi, today we're talking about our block for April. You know what they say, April showers bring May flowers. So stick with us just a moment and we're going to get started on our May block. And I've got a new technique to show you that could be really helpful. And welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Today we're talking about the block of the month for the month of April. And what do you usually associate with April? That's right, it's those April showers. As a matter of fact, today started out as a very nice day and has turned into a rainy day. So I can certainly appreciate April showers today. Now, in this series, I've showed you how to do blocks. That was my iron has gotten to temperature. I've shown you how to do blocks that you can either use in a quilt top or you could make pillow toppers for. And this is going to be no different today, with one small exception. I'm not going to demonstrate or show you the final product for today's project in a pillow form at all, and I'm only going to show you the technique for the actual block, and then it'll be up to you to finish it up however you want to. But what we are talking about today for April is an umbrella. Now, you know as well as I do that there are all kinds of umbrellas. So we're going to talk about two different kinds and how I'm putting those together. The first way I approached the umbrella was I did a little sketch of an umbrella shape. And I did this on just some plastic mylar. This is not the special heat-proof mylar, just a regular piece of mylar. And I sketched out the shape. And I've also put the little ribs in here so that if we want to, we can make them each different colors. And I put little letters on them so I'd know which one was which. More on that in just a minute. The first way I did this was approach it as if the umbrella was all one color. So I sketched out the shape of the umbrella on the back side of a piece of fabric. And for this one I used a red fabric with a white polka dot. And then I put a small piece of fabric down at the end, the little scalloped end, right sides to right sides, and sewed right along the edge of the shape to give me those scallops. And then I turned it over, so now I have a facing on that piece of fabric. Then I took the sketch that I had made on a piece of paper, including the little ribs along the sides of the umbrella. I'll show you that here as well. And there's the back side. So on this piece of paper, then what I did was I used my machine and stitched on those lines in a contrasting thread. And for these stitches here, I used a very small stitch. I think that was at 1.8 or 1.6, so that I can tear it off when I'm finished. And then I ran a stitch like a top stitch around the outside of the umbrella shape on the rounded portion and on the scalloped portion. So now this one is finished. I will tell you, let me back up just a little bit. After I got the facing on the scallop side, then I turned the rest of this. I folded it in and pressed it before I put that stitch on it. And then that way it allowed me to hold it in place and get a nice smooth rounded top. So now we're ready to remove this paper. And because we use such a small stitch, this should come right off fairly easily. I find if I do it from one side, it usually comes off a little bit better than trying to pull it from both sides. Okay, and we're all off except for that very top. So we're just going to use a little helper there. You could use a stiletto. You could use, like I'm using a seam ripper, a sharp pair of scissors, whichever tool really works best for you. Now right up there at the top, it's being a little cantankerous for us and it doesn't want to come off. If you're using the seam rippers, be sure you don't actually accidentally take your seam out. More ripping and less, more tearing and less ripping is probably what I should say. Okay, I've got one little piece here. And then right up there in the very top where all those seams come together, that one's got a couple of different seams. Okay, there we go. Now, this is my first try at this, and I don't know if your experience is going to be just as same as mine. The stitching is a little bit messy, so if I wanted to tidy it up a little bit, I could run a second seam right over the top, or I could even do a little tiny zigzag like a satin stitch on it. But I think that that's the good idea of how we can make the top of that umbrella. And then what we can do, let me get all my little tiny scraps of paper up. And remember, that's the same shape as we used here. And then what we're going to do on our quilt block, or your pillow cover block, is we're going to place that umbrella top just a little higher and maybe off to one side and a little bit at an angle. So maybe your center would be about here, and you're going to place this up a little bit. And then I used some black solid fabric. You could use gray. You could use just about any color, I think. I think I would go with something dark. And that's going to be your handle for your umbrella. I made a 1/4 inch bias tape, so I can sit this tape right underneath the umbrella, trim it to the appropriate size. If I want to, I could carefully glue a round tip in place, and we'll do this a little bit more in detail as we look at our second option for this umbrella. But there you have an umbrella. Personally, I wish this was a little bit neater. I kind of rushed through it, to be honest. I think if I'd had a little bit more time, it would be neater. And I could do it over again. I mean, it's just a little thing. So there's always that. The big thing that I wanted to talk to you about today in this umbrella is I want to show you how to use English paper piecing to make your umbrella. And I'm going to set this aside, and I'm going to bring out a couple of pieces of brightly colored fabric. Let's see, there are 5 wedges on here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then let's do 5. They're very bright, eye-catching, and I'm going to grab my scissors that I don't use for fabric, and I'm going to take this same design and I'm going to cut these wedges out. So there's A, B, C, D, and E. Now, from here, and I wanted to make sure my camera was rolling because I only have one of those, and I know I've cut it up, right? Okay, let's see about cutting a small piece of fabric that we can do a little EPP on this. And we're ready to move on. This is going to be our first fabric. And we're going to use this nice piece of orange to make us a EPP piece. Now the point at the top is going to be the most difficult section, so I'm going to cut that pretty close so I don't have as much fabric to deal with in the end. Okay, there we go. Now, be sure that you move that piece in the right direction when you put it in place. And I think you can see me here. And then I'm going to use some just spray starch. And I've sprayed some in my cap. And we are going to adjust a little bit. If you watched our series on Miss Kelly, we talked a good little bit about making applique pieces with the spray starch method, and this is going to be very similar to that because we are going to get that wet and then we're going to use our iron to shape it over that piece of mylar. And this is a little bit of an experiment for me as well because I'm not using the heat-proof mylar, and just as soon as I said that, I started having problems with it. But we use that shape to mold the fabric against. And I'm going to share with you in just a minute what's going on here. Okay. So the good and the bad. I got the shape. The point at the end is going to be a challenge because that sharp of a point is going to be difficult to work with. One thing we can do is trim this up a little bit. But I think it's going to be workable. Probably when we put that together, we're going to have to work with it a little bit. Okay, so there's one. Now, also, while I'm thinking about it, because this is not heat-proof mylar, the mylar is buckling. So it's going to have nooks and crannies in it. I think we'll leave it at that. If you've ever had a problem with your cutting board getting warped because it got too hot, it's the same principle. But in this case, it's just a little piece of mylar versus your expensive cutting board. Oops, hot iron. Okay, and I was able to iron down at the bottom to get that little scallopy shape. Let me show you that piece. There it is. Pretty well. And now we're going to move on to the next piece. I want to get a couple of these done and show you how I sew them together, and then I will finish up the other pieces and we'll look at the finished product. Okay, and remember when you put these on to cut them, they're going to be face down on the back side of the fabric or face up on the top side. Now when you mold them, you're going to need them so that the right side is down, and then the top side or the right side of this is down on the back side. That's a little complicated, but if you kind of play with it a bit, you'll know. Whoops, and I need to trim that up a little bit more because it's got a lot more fabric than we need. Okay, I got both sides with the starch on there. And I am going to fold it over and start pressing. Now my guess is this one's gonna warp just like the other piece did. But that's okay. This is a single use. If you wanted to do both the quilt top and the pillow, you may want to cut two if you're going to use this technique. Okay, then let me work here on this point a little. Okay, and then the scalloped edge. We're going to trim that up a little bit too. When you're working on that scalloped edge, you really don't want more than about 1/4 of an inch because it has to kind of stretch out when you iron it instead of in, and it will give you a nicer arc if there's less fabric. Okay, we're going to flip that over. Okay, now what makes this a little different from EPP is that usually with EPP, when you make a piece, you're going to baste it or glue it in place. We're not going to do either one with this. I think maybe I might put a couple of drops of glue here at the end. Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do first. We're going to take the pieces out. I'm going to take that piece of Mylar, and you can see how that warped. But these are two pieces that go right up next to each other. We might put just a, am I getting glue out? Yeah, there we go. Just a little bit of glue to kind of hold it in place. We don't want too much because as we start sewing these together, it'll be really difficult to sew. Okay, let's go with those two right now and see what happens. I'm going to take a little piece of tape, and you can use masking tape, painter's tape. I've got some just clear like wrapping tape, and I'm going to put these two pieces together, and I'm going to turn it in the front and tape them in the front. Oops, I see a little bit of a problem on this piece. Our little scalloped on the bottom isn't scalloping for us in one corner. I'm going to get just a little bit. I think this is also a project that is best done at leisure, meaning you don't really want to rush yourself. Ow, hot again. You would think I would learn. Okay, there we go. All right, so we're going to put these together. And what you'll notice is that they're going to come together pretty close. There may be a little bit of difference, and if there is, you can almost sort of put one piece on top of the other piece. If one edge is a little bit nicer or has more of the look you're looking for. I'm going to tape this, and then I'm going to show you what we have. So we have those two pieces together. Those two pieces together, and they're taped. Now we're going to take some thread. And I've moved things around here now. And I don't know what's happened to my thread. These are taped together on the front. On the back, they're just sitting next to each other. And what we're going to do is we're going to come in underneath the piece that's folded under, and we're going to do a flat back stitch on these two pieces to hook them together. And let me turn on this light so we get just a little bit more light. We're just going to stitch from one side just underneath the edge to the other side just underneath the edge. A couple of threads is all we really need to catch. And we're going to sew up this seam. Okay. And as you get going, that will hold itself better, and it will be much easier to stitch together. You also could baste these in place. I always find though that if I'm working with curves like this, in order to baste it, I have to do a whole lot of stitches that come from one side to the other to hold them in. So I think that the starch works better. And I will say that I don't know, the glue was a good thing I think to put in there, but it is making this stitching a little harder than it would be without it. Okay. I'm going to make these stitches just a little bit bigger than I normally would. Usually I stitch pretty close together when I'm doing EPP, because usually it's all EPP and you want it to hold together. So that's my theory in stitching it very close. Now, I know this technique works because I used it on another project where I created an air balloon, a hot air balloon, using the same methodology. At the time, I didn't have the applique glue, and I didn't use Mylar. I just used cardboard, a lightweight cardboard, to create the design and the pieces. And then, like I said, when I basted them, I just used large stitches that went from one side to the other until I could get it sewn together. And then all those stitches came out or were clipped, and it got appliqued on the, it was a baby blanket it went onto, so it went onto that. And as far as I know, it has held together just the way you would expect it to, or you would want it to. Maybe that's a better description. Okay, we're coming up this curve here. It's easier to sew EPP when the cardboard is in there too. So the next one, we may leave the Mylar in this case in until after it's sewn. Or the problem is I can't see. It's awkward to hold. It's a little difficult to see. We're trying to make those stitches invisible on the front side, tiny on the back side. It's a little bit of precision sewing. Okay, last stitch, and this one we're going to put a little knot in. Okay. Trim that off. We're going to come back to the front and take the tape off. Okay, so we have those two pieces together. Now, one thing I've noticed is that my points on my arcs are not coming together. So when I get ready to finish the bottom, what I can do is I can adjust the curve in that arc so that they will come together. That's pretty easy to do. And it's possible that that one isn't quite in the right place either. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other pieces pretty quickly and then show you that in kind of stages as we get a little progress on it. So here we go. Okay, so I've done some work here. I've got some more stitching to do, but I wanted to show you how it's coming along. Let me tidy up a little bit because I can make a big mess in a hurry. Tape is sticking to my fingers. Okay, so again, this was our one-piece umbrella. And then we used the little mylar pieces to come up with a multicolor umbrella design. And that's what it looks like. It's just taped together right now. But you can see the ones that we left the mylar in hold their shape better so we can sew them together. And I think it's going to sew together much faster this way. You can also see that in this one, the difference between this and the other two, the seams lined up better with the mylar still in. And then also the little scallops on the bottom are a little more aligned properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew these together, and then we're going to use the same piece of bias tape for our umbrella handle, the umbrella stick that comes out, and then we're going to take a small circle and we'll find something to make a little tiny disc. And I want to make something really small, maybe 3/8 inch around or in diameter, that we're going to put up here at the very top of this umbrella. Like when you use an umbrella, there's a little piece on top, like a little tiny cap on the top that holds all those pieces together, and that's exactly what we're going to do on this one. Well, that was just a flash for you, but probably a good 15-20 minutes for me to get these sewn together. I'm going to take the tape off, and I want to let you know that sewing them together without the glue and with the mylar in place was much easier. So I do recommend that you leave that mylar or cardboard or whatever you're using in place while you stitch them together. So now you can see, oh, I've got a couple of pieces left in there. I'm taking these out. So this is all flexible now. We've got them all sewn together. Here we are up close. They're all sewn right up to this point here. And as we begin to finalize this, we're going to put, like I said, a little circle of fabric here, and then we're going to use the bias tape for our handle at the bottom. I did not stitch down the scallops because I want to play with that just a little bit as we put it together. So let me clear off here. Tidy up just a little bit. And then we're going to bring out our background fabric. Now, we've been using a white background fabric for this entire project so far. Let me grab this one. Oh, goodness. And we're going to mark some lines. Whoops. I don't think we need that anymore, but it is hot. I think that'll be okay where it is. And we're going to grab a invisible marker, water soluble, air soluble. And just like we did with the other one, we're going to mark the center. They don't have to be real heavy lines. We just want to know we're going about this. Okay, that's the center. Now, like I was going to say, we've been using all white background fabrics, but there's no reason to say that you couldn't use a variety of fabrics for the background of these blocks. Let's say, for example, you made the Valentine's Day square and you used a red background and then put the pink hearts on top of it. That would be very pretty. Or if you had a white background with a teeny tiny little red heart, that would just be adorable. And then of course for our St. Patrick's, our March one, we used the nice green gingham as a border around it, nice thick border. So there's no reason why you can't use alternate fabrics or just to let your imagination take you where you want your design to be. Okay, I've marked the center. And we're going to go with the multicolor umbrella, and I'm going to place this right about here. Now this, and I'm going to turn this way. This applique that we're putting on here is a little bit bigger than some of the other ones we've done. So we're going to forego a border on this one. I think if I were using designs that I was swapping up backgrounds, I might pick something with a little very light blue background, maybe with something that looked like clouds, or like a blue grungy fabric with some changes in the color so it kind of looked like the sky. That would be really cute. Or if you wanted something dark and moody, you could go with the gray fabric to represent storm clouds. Okay, it's all up to you because it's your quilt. So we've got this piece put together and it is pretty much ready to go. I think that's where we're going to want it. So I'm going to put down a couple of drops of glue. I've got one here, one here. And you know, this applique glue, it's water soluble. If you decide it's not where you want it, it's very easy to come off. Put a little bit there too. Now the one place I don't want to put it is right at the bottom in the center, because that's where our little handle is going to go. So this is kind of in place, but it's not really affixed. And I'm going to turn this around so I can work on it the way I'm seeing it. And what we're going to do is we're going to start, we're going to clip this off so that we've got a really good tight bias strip. And we're going to make sure that we've got glue on both sides of the fabric, about a little bit more than 2 inches down, about this far. And then we're going to take this and we're going to put it, if we're imagining a line that's going to run from here all the way up to the top. And we want it pretty straight. It's going to be right about the middle of that center piece. Yeah, that's about right. Okay, and then we're just going to press that in place. I think we're glued to here. And then how long do we want it? Probably to right here. So I'm going to put a pin at just this little distance marker there. We're going to add a little bit more glue. We want to make sure that's pretty straight. And like I said, if you get it and it's on here and it's a little bit off, you can always peel it off and reposition it. And then from there, we're going to try to make that turn. And this is just going to require a little bit of patience. And we're going to turn it ever so slightly. Now we do want it to be kind of a sharp turn. So we're going to have to keep that piece, particularly on the inside, glued. And we're going to stretch it just a little bit so it holds its shape. It's doing well so far. We're going to put a little pin right there. We can take that one out. And then we're going to give it just a little bit more glue. Another 1/4 to a 1/2 inch. We're working in really small segments. And we're going to pull it again and we're going to stretch it around so we can make that tight little turn. And we're going to stick the pin in there one more time, and we're going to make one more little point in the turn, and that's going to be it. So another 1/4 inch, I would say. I'm going to pull it a little bit. There we go. That's going to be the final spot right there. Now, I'm going to hold that down, and then I'm going to trim it about, I'd say for right now, about a 1/2 inch away. And when we get ready to sew it, what we're going to do is we're going to tuck it down in there. We'll probably have to trim it one more time just to make sure. So it's going to look a little long right now, but no worries, because when we stitch it down, we'll trim it and turn it under. Let me get these out of here. And now we can take a little bit more time and place a bit more glue around to hold the outside in place. And remember, we don't need any on the scallop on the bottom because we're going to reshape that a little bit as we stitch it down. We're going to take and stitch around in a running stitch around the edge of the fabric. I always find this is really hard to hold on to, but it is what makes the best circles for me. A little tangling in the thread. There we go. We're halfway around. Now we've shown a lot of different things tonight, a little new technique and how to use a EPP type process to give you a multicolor umbrella. And this is a technique that you could use for a lot of things. I mentioned earlier how I used it to make a hot air balloon applique for a baby blanket. But you could use it for just about anything. I have one other month that we may use something similar. We'll see how that goes as we get closer. Okay, so you want to stop it and start it on the same side of the fabric. Put your little cardboard piece in and then pull it up to get it tight. And what we're going to do is we're going to hold it down and we're going to pull it. And it's so tiny. We might have just a little too much fabric. We're going to keep moving. Now, I'm going to go back and do this again because it is way too big and thick. But what I would do is I would do this and then I would starch it so it would hold its place and then pull out the cardboard so you have just the fabric. On this one we've got the cardboard still in here. But I wanted to be able to show you how that piece, we're going to tuck all these little tails back underneath that umbrella. And then we're going to set this little circle right at the top there. And I've got a dab of glue on there. I don't know how well it's going to do. But you can see how that's going to go under there. And if you wanted to, you could make this a semicircle so it looked like it sat on top. And since I've got to redo it anyway, I think I might do that. So it's going to have a little point here, and then it's going to have our umbrella. We're going to fix this in our stitching and sew this down. So I think that pretty much gets what I think my idea is for April. Before we put our scissors away tonight, I just wanted to show you how I'm leaving this at the end of the evening. It looked a bit flat, as I was told, and it needed a little bit of dimension on it. So I took some embroidery thread and stitched around the sections of the umbrella to give it some more definition. And that does help it a lot in kind of finishing it off and allowing it to look a little more, not only finished, but a little more purposeful. It's not exactly what I was looking for, but I think for what our purposes are, to have something whimsical and have a block and a novelty quilt, I think it's fine and it's going to do the job. I may decide to put some kind of border around it or a little ribbon or something. So we'll see how that goes and just kind of play with this as time goes on to see what we might be able to add to it. I was a little disappointed in the edges here, the scallop on it, because they just didn't come out quite as arched as I was hoping for. And I think the other thing is this was just sketched out. I think if we had been able to find a line drawing of a umbrella that had more depth in its drawing, it had the curves that give it the impression that it's 3D, I think it would have looked a little bit better. But I'm still happy that we did it so you would be able to see the techniques of using this EPP process to come up with this. And we'll just keep moving forward. We may decide to come back and revisit this later and add something or change something. But for now, we're going to roll with this. I hope you've enjoyed this. It's a little different from our normal type of video, because it's more the idea versus the finished product and the technique on how to do it. But we're still learning, and we'll get this together and get it finished up and bring it to you the next time. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and we'll do more projects. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.